And that was a key takeaway. Was,
key takeaway was like people were not interested in like walking into our church building, but they were highly interested in having spiritual conversations with us.
They were seeking it out. They had nowhere else to go with that.
Welcome to Jesus in the Upper Left, where we're talking about gospel multiplication in the Pacific Northwest.
Okay, let's start. Let's do it. Go ahead. I'm Tim. I'm glad to be able to host today, and we are so glad to have Jake and Madison Nagy on Jesus in the Upper Left. And we are, you guys have been in Portland how many years?
Is it 8?
8.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Man, that went fast.
Yeah.
Yeah, it did.
Fantastic.
A lot of life.
Yeah. So we, as you know, we have folks that listen throughout the Pacific Northwest, and then who knows from where else, and all looking to share stories and learn about how is God working in different ways that he's multiplying churches, reaching people, making disciples, and multiplying churches. And so we're excited to hear your story of how God's doing that through you. But first, just tell us a little bit about who you are and your story, and then we'll get to kind of church ministry and stuff.
Yeah.
Great.
Yeah. We're Jake and Madison. We have a little family.
Yeah.
We have a daughter named Noah and a son named Morris. He's here with us, so he might chime in. He's giving me a smile.
There you go.
Jake and I met in college, and he's from Kentucky originally. Mm-hmm. I'm from Washington. And we met in college in California. And
Biola University. Go Eagles.
Nice plug. There you go.
Yeah. And I don't know. I think early on, as we were like deciding what to do with our lives and like how to mesh our personalities and skills and like passions and callings, we had this idea about church planting. I think it was probably born because we were, as like newlyweds in California, we were part of a church plant.
Yeah. So
that was probably our first taste of like the world of starting a new church and like reaching a new people group, really. So yeah, that's kind of the birth of us.
Did you find a church plant as college students?
We did, yeah. While we were at Biola,
Okay.
There was a church that was getting started in Fullerton. And actually even further back than that, when I was growing up, my parents came to faith when I was in kindergarten. Okay. And were a part of a church community for a couple of years. And then they actually left that church to help start a new church plant. I was maybe 8 or 9 at the time and had no vocabulary for what a church plant was.
What you were doing, yeah.
Yes. I just knew that we were doing this exciting new thing as a family. And for my parents, they were not on staff or anything, but they were just on the team of folks helping start a new church community. And so some of my like earliest memories of church and just my family being together were actually being a part of like doing a kids ministry together and growing in that way as a family all together. And so before I even had the language for church planting, it's cool that was something that had become a part of my experience in my life. And so it's cool to see all the little pieces that God was bringing together even before we moved here.
That's so fascinating. Like you were a part of something you didn't even have a language for. Like you just knew like that's what your church experience was, and found out later like, oh, we call that
a church
this. Yeah.
It's like a name for it.
Yeah.
Totally.
And so you met in college and started dating, got married. Mm-hmm. What led you to be a part of that church?
Yeah, we had been a part of a church being at Biola. We were part of a church in downtown LA that was like maybe 45 minutes to an hour drive away from campus. And so we would attend on Sundays, but we weren't able to be a part of a community. We weren't able to really do anything more than be there for 2 hours on Sunday morning. And I think as God was just stirring something in each of our hearts to want to do more, to go deeper, to be a part of ministry in some capacity, there was this new church plant in Fullerton. And I didn't even know too much about it, but just felt drawn to check it out. And eventually we both became a part of that community. And Madison worked with the kids ministry there. And,
I think maybe too, one reason was we just developed a relationship with the pastor and the two pastors, male and female.
Yeah.
And I think having the access to them was like really crucial for us at that moment. Like just having their discipleship in their ear and their counsel was like a cool thing that we could experience because it was like a smaller community that we couldn't at this other church that we had like been attending.
Yeah, even after we graduated and we're just working our first jobs, they each served, their names are Mark and Crystal. They served in really mentorship kind of roles for us. Mark would come probably every other week to my work, and during my lunch break, we would just walk around for 45 minutes, and I would ask him questions about pastoral work and church planning and family and prayer, and to be able to have, as Madison said, like access to someone, be able to ask questions and talk through those things with someone who you know cares about you. I think that was also a really formative experience for what God would have us do later down the road, which is pretty cool.
Yeah.
So how long were you part of that church? And then tell us the journey to the Pacific Northwest.
Yeah.
We were probably there for 2 years, maybe.
Yeah.
And the journey to the Pacific Northwest, I think, was equal parts spiritual and practical, maybe.
Yeah.
We, mostly me, knew that I didn't really want to live in Southern California for long term. And I'm from Washington, and so I think kind of was like, hey, Jake, like what could get us back up there a little bit further?
Yeah.
So I think we just began the process of like, we had no ties anywhere.
Sure.
So we just were open. We were asking God, asking each other, like, where could we? I think we are kind of people that want to settle somewhere for like the long haul and like want to really know a place. And so we just started asking ourselves, like, where is a place that we could settle for the long haul and like raise a family and like really invest in and church plant potentially. And so, that was a process of discernment. But what ended up happening was we left Southern California, we quit our jobs, and we actually like took a hiatus and spent 4 months like traveling around the world before we even decided where we wanted to settle.
We took our like 6 belongings that we had as a young married couple and put them in Madison's parents' garage, and we did a backpacking trip for 4 months. Started at PDX and ended up going all the way around the world, basically staying with friends and friends of friends, missionaries, pastors, just followers of Jesus, trying to live their life and love their neighbor in different cultures and contexts. And that, without a doubt, was one of the most formative experiences for us, not just in ministry, but really just in our faith. To go from Haiti to Western Europe, to West Africa, to the Philippines, Australia, it at times felt so jarring because the buildings that we would meet in, the songs that we would sing felt so different from each other. And yet there was this common thread that kept emerging of just ordinary people loving their literal neighbors and sharing the gospel wherever they went.
He really wants a mic.
Morris really liked that point.
Yeah. Good job, Dad.
So I think that was really formative because it caused us, even as we had this idea of like starting a church in our mind, it caused us to really take a look at like what, when you boil it down, like what is the church actually and like what's it for? And we had to do a lot of like soul searching and just like, like cultural comparison to really boil it down to like, in its simplicity, the church is about loving God and loving each other. And there can be so many different ways that can look faithfully. So I think that was like such a good experience that really shaped, I think, a lot of what we've been doing now.
And on that trip, we gathered in a church community under a tree in a 1,000-year-old cathedral in a mud hut in a building where the roof had recently been blown off, and in a mega church that had 6,000 or 7,000 seat auditorium. And to be able to worship, have meals, watch people love their neighbors in their context in so many different places, that those common threads, as they started to emerge, we came back to the Pacific Northwest with, I think, a hunger to do something like that, to love our practical neighbors. And that brought us to Portland. We did a residency at a church in Portland And we also did something called Apartment Life, which I think was pretty foundational to our life and ministry and eventually what our church would become.
Yeah. So Apartment Life was it's an organization that places people in apartment communities that really want an event coordinator. So they're essentially like contracted employees that get to plan events for the apartment and really foster community because apartment and businesses know that community like keeps people.
Sure.
So it's kind of a retention strategy for them.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, Apartment Life is also a ministry that is intentionally placing Christians in these buildings so that they can like love people around them.
Yeah.
So our first home in Portland was this funny, pretty bougie like apartment on the water up on Hayden Island.
Nice.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And we got to spend 2 years there.
Yeah.
Really like, yes, planning events, but really getting to know our neighbors. And we did a lot of like inviting them over for dinner, sending them a card when they got a promotion at work, like sending them flowers when they lost a loved one, like just really like tangible fostering of relationships and getting to know people and their hurts and their pains and their joys.
Yeah.
And I think and that was kind of a really cool cultural experience of Portland too.
Oh, I bet.
Because we learned through that process that like people were not going to come to church with us. Like we invited people like, no, not a thing.
So you're doing Apartment Life, Hayden Island.
Yeah.
Yes.
And you're embedded in a church.
Yes.
Knowing that you're going to church plant.
Yes.
Hoping. Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
but that's the
That was the
plan.
goal.
Like
That's
that's
the
kind of
idea.
you had that vision already,
Right.
And so you're basically in this like intensive educational learning
Yes.
season.
Yeah.
And that was a key takeaway was
Key
100%.
takeaway was
come.
like people were not interested in like walking into our church building,
Yeah.
but they were highly interested in having spiritual conversations with us. They were like, not a problem with that.
Yeah.
They were seeking it out. They had nowhere else to go with that. The amount of times that someone would just start opening up about a deep wound in their life, a loneliness they felt, struggles in their marriage, whatever it might be, just because they didn't have anyone else to share.
Well, and in their eyes, you're the event coordinators.
Yeah.
Friendly.
Yeah.
You care. But
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think that there was this sense that like, I don't know if they would have had words for it, but we were like the building pastors.
Right, absolutely.
There's a sense of like, oh, like Madison and Jake are people that like will, that want to know those like hard, like deep parts of.
Yeah. And they want to just like hang out and watch a football game and have a meal together, but they also want to know me. They want to ask me questions about myself, and I feel like I can share with them. And I think that was something we even had friends from the church community where we were doing our residency who would come to some of our events.
Yeah.
Partially to support us in running the events, but partially to just have other Jesus followers around.
Right.
And they started establishing relationships with our neighbors. And then our neighbors were inviting them over to dinner and like pouring their heart out to them and seeking like spiritual guidance and wisdom from our friends who didn't even live in the apartment complex, who, weren't on staff with Apartment Life like we were, but they were just
That's cool.
seeking folks that they could share their life with. And then COVID happened, and we were still doing Apartment Life there. And that even presented, I think, its own set of learning tools and experiences for us. I think loneliness just felt like it took off even more. There was even more loneliness than we'd experienced before. There were some really cool moments that we got to have. At one point, there was a couple at the apartment complex who had both been widowed after 40-year marriages, and they fell in love and got engaged, and then COVID happened. And they asked us to officiate their wedding at the apartment complex
Right.
during COVID.
With masks on.
Yes, yeah. They're a couple feet apart. But it's like one of those like funny memories where, you recognize that people are seeing you as something more than just a neighbor. They're leaning on you. They're seeking to have a meaningful relationship with someone. And I think that really was kind of another big push for us to want to have church that was shaped around community, having meaningful spiritual conversations with folks who may feel hesitant or have never been to church. It's been a long time since they've been around church, but there were folks who were not only willing, but eager to be a part of a community where they could sit around a table, eat some food, and ask questions to people that they knew cared about them.
Yeah. So I think all of those things kind of were part of the stew that ended us in a point where we thought that like house church was something we wanted to experiment with. And thankfully the church that we were with and kind of the greater church planning organization that we had connected to, they were really willing to like let us do this experimental thing that just doesn't look like the traditional model of church. So yeah, we planted with the intention of being a house church community, specifically like a network of home churches, and also intended to stay that way. I think that we got a lot of questions early on of like, how long will you be doing this in your home? And we were like, oh, this is it. Like, this is what we were doing.
The short and long-term goal.
Yeah. So that was 2021 that we kind of started that process of actually becoming our own church.
Yeah.
Great. So tell us about that. Tell us, I mean, I don't even think you said the name yet. So tell us the name of your church and then like the story, but like those, I mean, that's a key question that you're getting from the outside. It sounds like, oh, okay. Is this a startup strategy or is this going to be the kind of the shape and the DNA of the church?
Yeah, absolutely. Morris is officially joining us.
There we go. Morris, so good to have you. So glad you're here. And then talk also about your church growth strategy.
Having children.
That's right. Yeah, so our church is named Kainos Church. And began in 2021. We'd finished our residency at the church where we had been working, and they commissioned us out. And we started gathering at our home. We had one house church community, and a couple of folks had come with us had kind of been sent out from our sending church, and just some other friends from the city. And so we started meeting.
Can I make a point about the name real quick?
Yeah.
Kainos is Kainos, and the reason that it's named this weird Greek word is because we actually stumbled upon a coffee shop in Portland with that name, and we actually happened to be on a prayer walk at the time that we stumbled upon this coffee shop. We were specifically praying for God to do something fresh in Portland, and people often like come to Portland in our experience to find something fresh, like to leave their, Midwestern values or to get a new job or to like literally experience the fresh air of the Pacific Northwest. And so we were kind of just like intrigued by this word, Kainos. And
prior to seeing the coffee shop?
No, coffee shop introduced us this word.
Gotcha.
Okay. So we stumbled upon, we were praying for something fresh, stumbled upon the coffee shop, and we were like, what's this word? And we looked it up, and it means fresh.
Yeah. As we were praying specifically, God, would you do something new and fresh in us?
Oh,
so we were like,
so that was
whoa.
Wild. Yeah. And so we just couldn't shake that word and that idea that like, though house church is not new, it's literally like ancient. It feels like a fresh take on church for a lot of people that we were coming into contact with.
Yeah. We asked permission, by the way, if we could use that name from the coffee shop, and they said go for it.
That's cool. And I mean, there's believers that started that. So followers of Jesus are.
Yes,
100%. And that is our Sabbath coffee shop that we go to every Friday, which is pretty great. We started kind of 2021, meeting in one home, and we had learned, Tim, from you, from Kansas City Underground, Tampa Underground. There's, a number of folks who are doing this. We didn't want to reinvent the wheel. As Madison said, this is actually a very ancient practice or way of gathering as a church, but has also been done in recent years in a number of different cultures and contexts, and often is done in a missionary context, I think, too. We had friends who had done this type of model in North Africa and in India, and I think as we saw that, we realized Portland is very different than those cultures and contexts, certainly. But I do think something that those cultures and contexts have in comparison with the Pacific Northwest, this region, is that there are a lot of people seeking something new and fresh. And there are a number of folks who, I think as they're seeking that, they're finding that their job at Nike or just hiking every weekend or whatever, it's not satisfying. It's not fulfilling that desire for something new or fresh in the way that maybe they had hoped for. And we had hoped that, having community, friends that you could rely on and would show up for you and would help you know Jesus more in a more intimate way, that could be done over a table, over a meal, over conversation. And so the discovery text and DMM methods, disciple-making movements, those were kind of foundational for us as we were getting started. And essentially what we will do on a Sunday together in our homes is we'll get together, we meet over a meal. And so as we're eating our meal, we'll spend time just talking, catching up about our week. We'll take some time all together to share the highs and lows of our week. Okay. Someone got a promotion, someone lost their job, someone found out they were pregnant, someone found out that they are sick. And just being able to bring those pieces of ourselves together, I think, has been really, really meaningful. So we start there, and then I don't know if you want to take it from there, what we do after we eat and talk about those highs and lows.
We are very discussion based, so we have pre-planned a scripture that we go through, and then we essentially have hijacked like a discovery methods questions of going through certain passages. And we just have found that those are such good fuel to like a really good discussion around scripture. We will read a text together in a couple different translations, and then we'll go through a series of questions that really just get our minds to chew and meditate on the passage. And there's not any one teacher. There's we would call a facilitator of the discussion that's helping guide the conversation and maybe like interject some context when appropriate. But we really try to stay away from like any one person teaching. And
it's not a sermon necessarily.
It's very much a group discussion. And that's been so awesome, I think.
And just last year, we finished a 3.5-year journey. Our very first Sunday where we gathered together in our home, we started with Genesis chapter 1, verse 1. And just decided, let's just keep going. And so last year, at the end of 2024, we finished a 3.5-year journey of going through Genesis to Revelation together. And one of my favorite things was that as we gather together and we're reading an epistle, someone might bring up a question that they've been wrestling up with about Pauline theology. And another person might say, who's Paul? Because we have folks who've been around church their whole life and they've had certain questions that they've been wanting to ask or are wrestling through. And we have folks who have never been a part of a church community, are brand new, or even we'll often say we have people who are discovering Jesus. We have people who are trying to decide if they want to follow Jesus, and kind of everything across the board. And so
our words are, you're getting it a little bit wrong, Jake.
Sorry.
Our words are people that are intrigued by Jesus, investigating Jesus, or invested in Jesus already. Those are kind of the three categories of people.
Invested.
And
intrigued. So people that are like intrigued or interested. So people that are like new to Jesus, but like interested. People that are investigating Jesus. And I would put that in, there's like a good amount of people that are maybe disillusioned with Christianity or with the church that find themselves still investigating Jesus, like putting him to the test. And I think this is a place that serves them well because they really get to like for themselves in community, just like study scripture and investigate it.
So that's fantastic. Oh, it's all I words too. So you,
exactly.
he wanted to use.
I was trying to use
Ds.
words that start with a D.
You're coming up with that on the fly. I was like, we have these words.
We do.
So what is that like? Can you speak to like just what's that been like to have a mix of people and both if you maybe can speak to like the fruit that you're seeing
Yeah.
or what's encouraging to you. And then also what's the challenge of having people who do have a let's say church background and then the expectations that go with that versus no background, or they're coming with kind of a slant because they've been wounded or hurt or disappointed in some way.
Totally.
Yeah, I think, well, just that question is very poignant. Like, there are like really awesome things about that and like challenges about that. It's probably one of our favorite parts though of doing church in this way is getting the diversity of even beliefs or belief maturity in the room. And really, I think we have to actually trust that the Holy Spirit speaks to everyone.
Yes.
And so that can be a challenge to like release control of a sermon where you can like really like package things well and trust that the Holy Spirit's going to speak to people anyways. So I think we've had mornings where we're like, man, so that's that thing that person just said.
It's going to chuck it. That's going to fly. Like, we're going to catch it over here.
We've had mornings where we're like, that person that is new to faith, like they just taught me something. That I've been following Jesus for 20 years.
Cool.
Like we've had moments where people have like come into a conversation with like some deep hurt from that text that they've been carrying for years. And like in community, we're able to like see a different way, like see a different point of view. And that's just like so fun and healing to us, especially because it's like, that truly was the work of the Holy Spirit. That was not anything we said in a sermon. Like that was the Holy Spirit working through community that just like freed that person of this bondage they've carried with this passage.
100%. And I think that is also like the challenge can be when you're watching someone wrestle with something and you don't, the morning comes to an end and you can see on their face, not just on their face, I don't know, sometimes when you're preaching a sermon, you look out and you can see this really working for this person, but that face over there looks like, I don't know if it's landing, you know? But when you're having conversation, you get folks saying like, wow, this was so freeing for me. This was so helpful for me. But you also get someone saying, this still feels really hard. I don't feel like I got resolution to this. And they're saying it. And so I think the joy and the pain, the beauty and the struggle of doing church around the table is people. It is the most beautiful, rewarding part, and it's the most painful part. When you're walking with folks for a long time and you're getting to hear about their life and their growth, and all of a sudden it's like 2 steps forward, 1 step back. It hurts. It hurts at a personal level because you are so invested in each other's lives. And so I think it is the great joy and the great pain. But, you know, Madison and I were talking the other day about, even as we were finishing this 3.5-year journey going through scripture, reading the New Testament letters and how much, when you're reading them in a community of people that you've been investing in for years, so much of the language of the authors really comes across as like, I just love you and care about you so much. And I'm so rejoicing with you, but also, man, this thing is really hard. It's frustrating. Like you feel like it is a conversation between people who deeply care about each other. And I just felt myself like really feeling that at a deeper and a different level than I had experienced before, getting to see, you know, folks engaging that way. And so I think, I don't know, there's these different folks who are coming to my mind, even as you like ask that question. There's an elderly woman who's a part of our community who Madison started meeting with. She's what I would just call like a spiritually hungry person. She has investigated all kinds of religions and spirituality across the spectrum and found community. Madison began to disciple her, and over a multiple year journey, she chose to give her life to Jesus and be baptized in a backyard.
There you go.
And around that same time, there was a young man who was discipling that had grown up in Portland, went to the University of Oregon, never knew a single follower of Jesus, through high school in Portland, through 4 years at U of O, and went to grad school at Arizona State. And while he was there, maybe 3 weeks before the end of his program at Arizona State, he met a friend of mine who invited him to church, and he went and the program ended, this guy was moving back to Portland, and that buddy of mine called me and said, "Hey, would you meet this guy for coffee?" Yeah. He came to church with us 3 times, and he's moving back to Portland. And so we started to meet. He became a part of our community, and he had no background with
church. He's asking, who's Paul?
Who is Paul?
Who's Paul?
We actually bought him a copy of the Jesus Storybook Bible, and gave it to him, and he like went home and read the whole thing.
And he's got a grad degree.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It's like my favorite theological text, and just the hunger and the questions that he had, and so finding just that it could be a 20-something young guy and a 70-year-old woman, and both of them are, and everyone in between are bringing their questions and their backgrounds together, and they get to do that amongst a group of people who they know care about them. I think that is the most rewarding and beautiful part of it. And it can be a struggle. It feels like really slow and steady work a lot of weeks. But to get to watch someone go through that journey in a community of other people is it's really beautiful.
It really is. That's fantastic. Thanks. So how many years now? Coming up on 4?
Yeah, 4 years.
So you've been going for 4 years. Yeah. Can you kind of share some of the journey that you haven't talked about? So you've talked about kind of the actual experience of being a house church, and you've multiplied as well.
We have 3 house church communities now.
So there's a whole nother layer to your experience and growth as leaders of multiplying out. So as you talk about all this, you're not in all of those. Like other people are leading those.
Yeah.
So that's part of it. And then also a big part of your reality as leaders is being bivocational.
Yeah.
And so can you kind of share what that has been like for you, your experience of that?
Absolutely.
Yeah. I think for really our whole church planning journey, we've kind of juggled work within this. Sometimes that's looked like both of us working other jobs. Sometimes that's looked like me working another job right now. And probably for the foreseeable future, it looks like Jake working a second job. Yeah. And I get to be with the kids. You're probably the best.
Yeah. I'm also a middle school teacher.
There you go. Okay.
And I went through a process. I started substituting at a school. I love kids, as you can see. Started substituting at a school during COVID. An opportunity came up to teach middle school Bible, and that's started now like a 5-year journey of teaching middle school. And I think that the bivocational piece for us, there's maybe multiple whys to it. Mm-hmm. I would say one of them is that coming in and planting in Portland, something that we heard, something we saw, something we experienced was that most church plants, it is, as I mentioned, slow and steady work. Yeah. Churches typically do not blow up overnight and suddenly become really large. It requires like an endurance, and something that we felt about being bivocational and house church, kind of the collision of those two things, was that it would allow us to go at a sustainable pace. Whereas we were discipling folks and it was growing, we didn't have a huge budget that we needed. Sure. Since we're both bivocational, we don't own a building for the church or something like that. It allowed us financially to be a bit nimble and flexible. And I think it also has allowed us space and opportunities and avenues to be in a more like typical working role. And so as we're asking other folks to open up their home to their neighbors and host a house church community, or to facilitate one of these conversations, we're doing so as we are also working other jobs. And so, I teach my middle school students. We have a couple of teachers within our church community, which is kind of fun. So I'm not the only teacher, but it's cool because I think that has allowed us from a church planning side to be a bit flexible and nimble, but has also given us space as a family even to have, just to be able to take care of our family, to provide insurance, to have some of the things that we need to pay the bills. And also has helped us discover some other passion points. I think ministry can be
all consuming.
All consuming. Yeah. It can be a grind.
Absolutely.
And so at times, being in my class, being a teacher is a grind.
Well, I was going to say, being a house church planter and pastor is one of the few things that makes being a middle school teacher sound a little bit easier. So well done. Good choice.
Exactly. Yeah. 100%.
And I will say Jake has a passion and like a skill set in teaching, and house church, the way we do it doesn't actually allow for him to be like preaching every Sunday.
Yeah.
So you actually, like, to your point about it, like allows you to practice some of your passion in a different way.
Totally.
I think that's really healthy for like us as people too.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And can I just say, there's not a lot of leaders that could do that. So way to go. Like to say we're going to go where God leads us, even though it's not like, especially as a young leader, say even 5 years ago, to go, well, I really want to utilize this gift. And so I'm going to design a methodology around, and sometimes God, obviously God blesses that. But I would imagine that you had to lay down something in that, which you've had to lay down a lot of things as you've walked this journey, which is so admirable.
Yeah. And also I think that it has been really freeing in some cool ways too. I think that, as Madison was saying, one aspect of the way that our church operates too that we haven't spoken about yet is that we gather in homes on Sundays, but once a month, the third Sunday of every month, our house churches gather together for what we call our collective gathering. So right now we have 3 house churches, and when we gather together for these collectives, that is a time where someone preaches. We have musical worship that we do together. We take the bread and the cup together. We meet not in a home, but like in an older church building. And so there's kind of multiple reasons for that. One of the reasons for that is that we want to gather and worship in a setting of more diverse believers than just our home. We kind of call it's almost like a family reunion in a way, especially as we've started to multiply, gone from 1 to 2 to 3 house churches. Sometimes that feels like it stings a little bit. There can be a loss of, some of these folks are going to go and help start this new house church. And so the collective is a regathering where we get to be all back together again. Oftentimes, that is also a chance for us to teach and either conclude something that we've been reading in our homes or start something new that we're going to be reading over the next month. Right now, we're going through the Beatitudes. And so, we started with, at our collective, Blessed are the poor in spirit. And then we have been reading stories and Psalms that are kind of centered around folks who have experienced being powerless, being poor in spirit. And now we're just this past Sunday, we had our collective and we talked about blessed are those who mourn. And so this week we'll read the story of Jesus mourning the death of Lazarus. And so these collectives allow us a chance to gather back together, but it also is a chance for preaching, for singing, for some of the things that are maybe lost a little bit when you are in homes doing things a little bit differently. It's not that we don't think that preaching and teaching of the Bible in that way is unhelpful. We absolutely think it's a helpful tool. We think it's one of multiple helpful ways to engage in the scriptures together. And I think a lot of churches we're all wrestling with that. That's like in one way, shape, or form. Many churches have, if they're teaching on a Sunday morning in a preaching style, they also maybe have a small group where people gather together in homes. And so I think all of us, we're often trying to find a balance between those two things. And so I think that that has been helpful for us with the collectives, and then being bivocational and having this avenue to teach. I think something, when I've had conversations with folks sometimes who are curious about this model or doing church in this way, especially for folks who have been leaders or maybe enjoy preaching or teaching, it could feel like I'm never going to get to use this gift, this passion that I've cultivated, that I went to seminary or Bible college to use. Do I just have to throw that in the garbage? And my answer is no, absolutely not. But I think you'll get to use that skill in this model in some creative ways, as well as being able to use it in the way that you've often done. So I hope that's not too much of a rabbit trail, but.
Well, no, it's not at all. And it's part of what, you're learning and what you've experienced and how you've it's not just theory, right? Like
Yeah.
you guys are walking it, and it brings to mind for me just the need for different models and different. I remember, coming to Portland and getting involved in church planting, which was all so new for me, and one of the things I heard early on was it takes all kinds of churches to reach all kinds of people, and you have chosen to pioneer a lesser known style, methodology, form of church, which is ancient, and so in no way less valid, and I would even say probably more needed in our context, because there are so many people that you describe in the apartment that, we have that in theory. So many of us have heard like, oh, there's people that don't know anyone who doesn't know Jesus. Yeah. Well, if you're saying that and you're a Jesus follower, chances are you don't know that guy yet. Like, you know that one, right? You've met that one, somebody who's gotten into adulthood not knowing anyone. Right. And it will take a different form. Now, some of those might get invited by a friend and go into an established church with what would, let's say, more traditional teaching formats and sermons and preaching and that kind of thing. And that's wonderful. God's going to use that and continue. And then there's going to be other, whether it's a conversation at a coffee shop or a coworker or a house church that is going to help somebody come meet Jesus and move from interested, investigate, intrigued, invested in Jesus. Yeah. None of this discovery stuff. Stop.
Yeah. I know. Yeah. And I just wanted to comment on finding out about house church networks or home churches is hard because it is just like mostly really like through word of mouth relational avenues. Like there's not many good like websites built to like connect to a home church. But we in this journey have been able to connect with quite a few people in the Portland metro area.
Totally just fell over. Oh.
It's okay though. Yeah.
It might be under.
We'll have to edit this moment. Yeah. It's okay, pal. It's okay.
Is it under?
Yeah, bud.
He ditched it.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm not holding this. That's what I'm doing. Actually, give me 1 second. Sorry, Tim. Thanks for real life in here with us.
Oh, wait, this is great, man. Now he's happy.
Yeah.
Big smile.
Oh, there it is.
Yeah, he's silly
cool.
boy.
Let's adjust this a little bit.
There you go. Okay. Here we go. Just make you happy.
Here we go.
You might try to grab the microphone, so just be aware of that.
It's okay, pal. It's okay.
What is going on?
Here you go.
There we go. Okay, I'm just gonna start that thought over.
Yeah.
Great. Yes. Good little interlude there.
Something I wanted to comment on is what you said.
Something I also wanted to comment on was it's often hard to find and hear about home church networks because it's all word of mouth primarily. There's not a ton of like web space or like advertisements dedicated to house churches. But through this process, we've been able to connect with some people in the Portland metro area that have been doing this work for a long time, like doing home churches. And that's been like such a joy. It actually kind of feels maybe to me like how they would have felt in the New Testament, where like you hear about another house church and you're like, oh my goodness, hi, like let's meet up. Let's talk about, the Bible.
Well, and didn't you say you met somebody who's been leading house churches in the area for like 30 years?
35 years.
Yeah.
35 years.
We're
Shout
obsessed
out
with
to
Dan
Dan.
Mayhew.
Yes, there it is.
He is kind of the facilitator, architect of this house church network called the Summit Fellowship.
Yeah.
And they've been in different pockets of Portland and Vancouver for 35 years doing home churches. So that's been really fun.
Yeah, it really is. And I'm a big hockey fan. And when we first moved to this area, there was rumors of what would become the Seattle Kraken, the new NHL team in the Pacific Northwest. And what I've loved about the Kraken becoming a part of Pacific Northwest culture is that there are folks who were never really interested in hockey before because it just didn't exist in this area, who now not only have a team to root for, but they get to be a part of establishing a new culture. I'm a Detroit Red Wings fan. My family is originally from Detroit. And there's this 100-year-old history to the Detroit Red Wings that can feel daunting. There's banners in the ceiling that are hanging, telling stories of championships from long ago. And if you just come in new to that space, it can feel a little overwhelming at times. And I think what's been really awesome to see with the Kraken is that it's actually a group of people like forming a new culture together. And that's probably one of my favorite things about the Pacific Northwest is the ingenuity, the creativity, and the ability to start something that is new and fresh and invite people into that. And having grown up in the Midwest, in the Bible Belt, and then moving out here, I love not just the creativity that the church is so often willing to lean into with the kind of this missionary mindset, but also this like we are building something together. We're building a kingdom culture that is not about any one specific church, but it's about the kingdom. And N.T. Wright was in Portland recently, and he was commenting on how awesome he thought it was seeing these pastors and leaders and believers gathered together and this spirit of like teamwork for the kingdom. And I had always maybe just thought that was my own experience coming from a different part of the country. So to hear someone that I respect so deeply say, and that really is a beautiful gift that this region has and is trying to tap into, that is not just for hockey culture in the Pacific Northwest, but it's for kingdom culture in the Pacific Northwest, that we want to build something together that's bigger and greater than any one church community. And I think that that has been one of the coolest things about meeting this new friend, Dan Mayhew, or other house church leaders, is that there's been a desire to help each other out for the sake of the kingdom coming in Portland and the Pacific Northwest as it is in heaven. And if there's anything that he could do to support us or vice versa, he's offered that. And I think we feel the same way for anyone who is already pastoring a house church, is thinking about planting a house church, becoming a part of a house church. As you've probably heard through this conversation, we're learning as we go. Right. But I think one of my favorite things is that spirit of we're building something for the kingdom together. Yeah. And that's why I love, one of the many reasons why I love getting not only to live in this area, but to be a part of kingdom work in this area.
Well, that's so good to hear, and so encouraging. Like you guys are really, Madison, you said early on, like you want to plant yourself and be rooted somewhere and spend your life and give. Spend in the sense of give, not just stay. And just so appreciate you, and I'm so just encouraged by what you're doing, by what you've given up, by you humility as you learn. Like that's a tough road. Church planting is challenging in any form, but a newer form where you kind of have to even find voices that have gone before you to encourage but. So thank you for all of that. Just deeply admire you and appreciate you and respect you and learning from you. And it's fun to just hear how you've made decisions and things that you've done. And that's been so good. It's so good for our region. One of your 3 current house churches is in Vancouver.
Right.
Yes.
So Portland, Vancouver. So when we say region, that's awesome in of itself. And what you are also a part of that you've found. Which has been my experience too, as a culture, and let's say, to use your illustration, a fan base, for the kingdom that is mutually encouraging and affirming and accepting, and that's a gift from God to this mission field of the Pacific Northwest.
Amen.
Thanks so much for joining us for this episode of Jesus in the Upper Left. We want to ask you a quick favor. Would you please subscribe so you don't miss a single episode, and share with those that are in your life that might benefit from the content. Hit the notifications button, rate and review, of course, and then head on over to upperleftshow.com where you can find bonus content, opportunities to connect with those around the city that are doing similar work as you, resources to help you, and just a way to connect to the community. We hope to see you again next time.